Want you to go back just a couple of moves from where we left it last to see how we actually got to this point, because this is getting very intense.
Yeah, very intense position, a crazy position. And we left it just before this moment. Black has actually just brought the bishop out to c5. White has put the knight on d2, just developing. Here, Magnus played a4, and Fabiano said, OK, I don't care. You're trying to clamp down on my queenside, but I don't trust you. I'm playing b4 anyway, allowing en passant. And this is a very bad strategic move from Fabiano, but a very good dynamic move. He's activating his pieces with gain of tempo. He gains time against this bishop, and now he trades off this bishop. And look at how the white knight is about to pounce on c5. White's gained a bunch of time at the cost of a couple of weak pawns, but who cares about weak pawns if you're going for checkmate, if you're going on the attack? And just beautiful, energetic play. Now another knight lands on the other side of the board, knight to g5, hitting this square with the knight now on h7, and we see greed being good. Knight takes pawn, and the rook defending. This is how we got to the current position. A nasty knight check threatened, as Robert pointed out, and discovered attack against this undefended, unprotected black rook. Black cannot castle kingside, of course. It's illegal right now because the white knight covers one of the squares the king wants to castle through. You cannot castle queenside because there would be devastating tactics such as knight to c5, a sacrifice, attacking the queen. If the knight is captured, suddenly the b file is open, and first you land a check, of course, and this would end in devastation. This would soon be checkmate. So Magnus, he had no other option, or at least he felt he had no other option than king d8. And now Fabiano says, OK, your king's heading in that direction. I'm going to preempt that decision and play a4, getting ready to attack if the king continues.
But he is giving up this pawn on e5, so Fabi says, I don't need this pawn in the center of the board. Black can take it with tempo, a shot against the white queen, and I'm guessing the white queen would just step back to a square like e2, and the knight's in trouble, a5 is coming, but this is getting very dynamic. In fact, these moves are on the board right now. Doesn't black have the better long-term position, because white's queenside pawns, they're split over there, so if the queens come off the board, suddenly black is much better.
And the knight is attacked, and if you go back to the square that it came from, I think the trick that you pointed out earlier becomes a reality. The knight can jump back to f6, and the rook is hanging on h8. You're going to end up losing material, which means that now Magnus has to retreat with the knight defending his rook on h8.
Yeah, he has to be so careful, Magnus Carlsen. Maybe only 2 moves to survive in the current position. As you say, Tanya, he has to choose one of these 2 squares, maybe this one, just to defend this rook in the corner. I like this one better because it also creates a threat, introduces a knight fork. These knights are dancing around like nobody's business. They're dancing like it's 1999. Knight to f4 threatened with a nasty fork. But who knows who's better at this point? It's chaotic.
Question, what are the chances that if Magnus goes knight g6, we see a repetition with queen g4, knight e5, queen e2, knight g6?
Oh, I think low odds, but it would be a logical end to the game, Tanya. A queen and knight tango to end this one.
I could see that happening because for Fabiano, if he lets this game continue and he doesn't have this initiative that he was relying on, we're talking about how he is worse long-term. The a4 and c3 pawns in any endgame, they will be the weakest link on this board. So that repetition is a funny one. We sometimes joke that, oh, these super GMs, they may just find a way to get the game over with. Here it comes, Tanya. Maybe you're the prophet after all.
Wow.
Hold your breath. If Magnus goes knight e5, you do have a check on g5. Is that a dangerous check?
I don't think so. I think that after the check, you can even interpose with the queen, and that's not what Fabi wants. I think he is going to bring his queen back to e2. Armageddon, perhaps. Here we come.
But look at the clock times. Fabiano is 4.5 minutes up right now. Armageddon, I think, would favour Magnus. Magnus, earlier this year in Norway chess, won 7 Armageddons in a row on consecutive days. He's the king of Armageddon chess, Magnus. I don't think Fabi should repeat.
But you know who he didn't play in Armageddon? Fabiano Caruana, because Fabi beat him head-to-head in the classical game. So they did not get that experience against one another. Of course, they have played so many times online here. But for Fabi, you don't look at Magnus' time like, oh, he's in severe time. You're like, he's Magnus Carlsen. How many times has he won the World Blitz Championship? How many times has he been the world champion? How many times has he won the World Rapid Championship? He knows that even with minimal time on the clock, Magnus can bring it. And his position, I think, is actually quite in danger of crumbling if he continues this game.
And you know who did win the 2 Armageddons yesterday? It was Fabiano Caruana. So big question right now. Will Fabi get more ambitious? Go ahead with that check on g5, which, as David said, can be easily blocked with the queen coming to e7 and perhaps doesn't give a white much. Or will Fabi just let go of the clock situation, play the position on the board? I don't really see another good square for the queen. Retreat to e2. Will we see this repetition happen? And Armageddon.
Moment of truth is incoming. Fabiano's reaching out for a piece.
Oh,
he plays on. He doesn't repeat the position. I think Magnus was hoping, maybe even expecting, a repetition of the dance between the queen and knight. Now this attack means that the knight probably won't choose the square that it was last on. If it goes back to g6, then white could land a check on g5, gaining even more time. Where's Magnus going to plant his knight? He goes back to f7 instead. No more checks. Also, most importantly, as Tanya pointed out earlier, defending black's rook in the corner. Everything protected now for black. And yeah, Robert, white is kind of a bit loose on both flanks right now. White's knight on h7 looks really oddly placed, and those pawns you mentioned on the queen side, long term, horrible structure there.
And that's why he pushed the pawn, because I was going to emphasize the point that he would have liked to bring his rook on a1 towards the center, but that pawn a move ago was under threat by both the black queen and the rook. So he goes a5, doesn't really carry a big threat. Is white really willing to trade off rooks? White's back rank is actually quite vulnerable. So if that a1 rook is traded for the a8 rook, there could be some back rank checkmate ideas. And you see the eval bar, it is going in Magnus' favor. He is down the clock, but 2 minutes for Magnus is an eternity to me.
Fabiano Caruana sending a clear message to Magnus by declining the repetition that was in his hand, that he is playing for more in this game with the white pieces. He feels he's got the pressure on. And it's understandable. You're about 4 minutes up on the clock. Magnus King not feeling safe. All the tricks and threats down the H-file. It is incredible to see Fabi fighting this out for the win.
Yeah, that's why he has so many fans. That's why we all love Fabiano. He very rarely takes quick draws. He very rarely takes the peaceful way out, let's say. He's always up for a fight, no matter what color, no matter what opponent. And normally the chess gods reward that type of attitude, that type of play. But this exact position is really still wild. And 5 minutes against just under 2 minutes, oof, it's anyone's game still. But no natural moves for white. I'm starting to worry about that back rank. As soon as you said it, Robert, I'm seeing all of these tactics that end up in black's favor just because the white king is slightly suffocated behind its own pawns.
And that's why he slid his king to the side, did Magnus. He's saying, please take my pawn on b6. There may be a back rank checkmating idea. And I also want to point out that look at how uncoordinated, discombobulated white's pieces are. There's a knight all the way up there on h7, a rook down there on h3, then a knight across the board on b3, and a rook there in the corner on a. What are these pieces doing? There's no harmony here, and I feel like in these types of positions, it's so easy to overlook a tactic and the back rank problems that we were just talking about. A takes b6, a swap on a1. White is not losing just yet, but you could see at some point that queen jumping into b5, and then the b1 square. Everything is loose.
And Magnus under 2 minutes, but looking extremely relaxed right now. He also has these ideas of starting to push the e-pawn, the central pawns up the board. This has happened to me, I don't know how many times. And I want to ask you guys, where you have just declined a repetition, declined a draw offer, and then you just start regretting it immediately.
Yeah, normally one of two things happen. Either you reject the draw offer and your opponent suddenly panics and they think, oh no, they must be believing in their position if they're declining a draw. Or, as you say, Tanya, you regret it immediately and suddenly the opponent's like, wait, I was happy with the draw a minute ago, but suddenly I want more. And rook to e1 instead. I don't know, Fabiano, he's giving up a pawn now. The a pawn, can it be snapped off? I like Tanya's idea, pushing the black pawn to e5 in the near future. It feels like Magnus is the one with options, but still much, much lower on the clock. Fabiano, is he just hustling now?
He's going for it. He's saying, if you take my pawn on a5, yes, black gains material, but white gains that c5 square access. And Magnus, he said, go for it. Maybe there's queen up one square. Trading off those queens would, of course, be in black's favor. Now he's up a pawn. And it's not just any pawn. It's an outside pass pawn, some of the most dangerous pawns in endgames. I'm worried for Fabiano right now. The time is actually evening. Magnus is gaining some confidence, and he's now gained an extra pass pawn.
After winning that a5 pawn, one thing's clear, that Fabi, whatever he needs to do, it has to happen in the middle game. Endgames are completely busted for black, even if for white, even if the material gets level. Even if you win that e6 pawn, the a5 pawn in the endgame will decide the result. Fabiano has to go all out in this middle game.
Yeah, and that's the problem. He's got the c5 square for his knight, but if the white knight had landed on c5, black could have forced a queen exchange immediately, queen to d6. That's why Fabiano has to run away, and look at that eval bar. It's been shifting, and black simply has an extra pawn now, and it's that powerful pawn. It's so strong against knights, these rook pawns. Yeah, it's all going wrong for Fabiano right now.
And this queen retreat, it's not a go in, go all out kind of move. It does signal that things have gone wrong for Fabi.
They certainly have. He is retreating to stop that runaway passer. He couldn't play his knight jump forward because a queen trade would have been forced. He can't afford that. And it's not like, and I want to give a quick shout out to Lazovic against Abusatarov. Denis Lazovic up a pawn trying to press in the endgame. Magnus, he's up a pawn, but there's so many pieces left on this board. He goes e5. The engine reacts at first saying, oh, it's going back towards the middle. But then with more depth, it realizes black is still in charge. And why not push those pawns in the center? Everything in this position is defended for black. Every single piece, save that rook on a8 next to the king over there, is defended, so he's pushing his pawns forward.
Magnus Carlsen up a pawn, but with a minute on the clock, Fabiano's knights will be jumping in. The queenside knight coming on to c5. The kingside knight can come to g5 in certain positions, creating some tactical ideas against that rook on h8. Yes, Magnus with the upper hand, but with just a minute on the clock and all the knights on the board, it's still a game for all three results.
Yeah, still a game, and great chess quality here, but also great air quality out there in Toronto, as we see just below, just at the bottom of your screens there. CO2 levels, not ideal, but everything else looking perfect. Great conditions for the players, and that's why they're all bringing their best chess right now.
It says air quality is fair. What would be a fair result in this game, Robert?
Well, for Fabiano, I think a decisive game would be the fair result. He's the one who chose to play on. I don't know in what direction, but when you make that choice, that was a big moment. He could have forced the draw more or less by repetition. He chose to play on, and he may pay the price. Look at the clock. It's evening up here, and that's really bad news for Fabi because I feel like Magnus' moves are easier to play. Fabi just retreated his queen backwards. He doesn't have a natural follow-up. The knight jump to c5 no longer comes with a threat against a pawn. I think that Fabi's running out of steam, running out of options, and, well, he may be running out of time.
Yeah, he's put the pressure on his own back here. The burden is on white to do something. You're simply material down. You have no coordination. I think it's the lack of coordination that's really killing him here. It's the hope that's killing him as well. That hope of trying to win, trying to play on, rejecting that draw. I just don't see any ideas at all. Black's central pawns, Black's A pawn, they're just marching. And, okay, the rook lands back where it came from on A1. It was just here 2 moves ago. Indecision from Fabiano. He's changing his mind. He's regretting his life choices. And I don't see any reason for Magnus not to push that pawn, push the black A pawn. You can move the black queen as well to B5 to protect it. Everything's turning. It's just collapsing move by move. And the one hope is still the clock. Magnus, uncharacteristically taking a long time here. He's already gained the advantage. He's done the hard work. And normally he's so good at stabilizing. Okay, he plays one of the best moves, clearly, queen to B5. But 30 seconds, that was half his time he spent on that one turn.
You give Magnus like one opportunity, just one chance, and he's just all over the game. Fabi declining that repetition. Magnus gets the A5 pawn, gets that E pawn rolling, and now the queen is coming out, and it's him who's putting pressure on white's pieces right now. Both players under 1 minute. It's going to take a miracle for Fabi to survive this.
And it's easier for us. We have the evaluation bar. We see what the trajectory of the game is. I don't think Fabi understood some of the problems he would face, that their danger would arise this quickly. And you see that knight, it was protecting the rook. It needed to be there. Now it hops towards the center into d6. It's going to jump forward some more. And look at Fabi move after move. He's retreating pieces as Magnus. He presses forward. There are no issues in Black's camp. This is looking really tough for Fabiano.
The last few moves, Fabi has been making retreating moves one after the other, while all of Magnus's pieces are coming into Fabi camp here. The A-pawn is going to tie down that rook on A1. Meanwhile, the other rook on H3 and the knight on H7 have been stuck there forever, not able to create the tactical tricks that Fabi was relying on, and that is desperation.
Yep, desperation G4. He had to do something, Fabiano. He was just stuck. You cannot just wait for your opponent to slowly improve and kind of get their pieces to ideal squares and slowly crush you. Now the white king is eternally weak. The whole idea was to kick back the black knights and go for black's central pawns, but this is a beautiful outpost. Black's knight on C4 where it's just landed, not just defending the center, but supporting the advance of that A-pawn. Again, he's just been playing with offside pieces. That white knight on H7, it grabbed a pawn, but it's been stuck on that square, that useless square, for 10, 15 moves now.
And there's not even a check against the black king. It's safely situated on C8. He goes, finally moves one of his knights. Now he can move the other, but the knights are superfluous here. They're stepping on each other's toes, and that A-pawn, it's about to become a queen. I wonder if queen B2, there it's played. He's giving up a rook with check in this position because he will get a new queen.
Wow, that is beautiful, Robert. Let's just show that variation. If the queens had been exchanged, then Magnus Carlsen would have won on the spot with a beautiful tactic here. Queen to b2 would have allowed a simple rook sacrifice. This is a check. The king can move actually in either direction, but king to d7 and no way to prevent a pawn from promoting to a queen. This would have been deadly. Let's catch up with the current position. Queen's still on the board here, of course, but look at this pawn on a2. It will decide the game before too long. White still dancing around without any purpose as Magnus tries to land the killer blow.
And the rook comes up just to protect everything. All of Magnus's pieces are doing something here. And now files are opening in front of Fabi's king. So he stole a pawn, but he opened a file. So the F file is open, the G file as well. And maybe this knight on E7 can go, queen B1 instead.
That is stunning.
Take my queen and give me a new one, please.
And on the way, give your rook as well. And Fabi panicking there, doesn't make his move in time. He just gives up, he resigns. What happened there? Did he run out of time?
It looks like his clock is on 0, Tanya. He ran out of time, but it was a lost position anyway.
Busted for Fabi. Magnus Carlsen. He plays, he wins. And there he takes his match against the world number 2 without